The return cries always arrive too late. They show up like echoes from a life that no longer fits, carried by voices that once believed you would never rise beyond their reach. After everything, those same voices tremble now, asking for the presence they once dismissed. The shift is unmistakable. Growth changed the tone of their regret. Success rewrote the memories they tried to twist. Distance exposed the love they pretended to give, but never truly understood. Once the crown settled on your spirit, desperation replaced their pride. They realized the version of you they walked away from evolved into someone they can no longer approach without trembling. Their tears are not for what they lost. The tears are for the person they never imagined you could become. Regret always comes dressed in softness. It approaches gently, hoping the new version of you still remembers the old comforts. Requests for forgiveness appear wrapped in emotional poetry. Conversations turn nostalgic, as if rewriting history could erase the wounds. But the throne you stand on was built from lessons, not illusions. You see through the sincerity they try to imitate. The ache in their voice exposes their own insecurity rather than genuine love. Their fear is not losing you. Their fear is being forgotten by the one who healed in a way they never believed possible. Royalty in this context does not mean wealth or grandeur. It means self-respect so strong that returning becomes impossible. Once the crown of clarity is worn, the entire dynamic transforms. The person who once doubted your worth now stares at the distance with disbelief. They underestimated how deeply betrayal shapes a soul willing to rebuild. Their expectation was simple. They believed you would always return. They believed you would always choose comfort over growth. They believed they were the anchor to your identity. Then the transformation arrived. The crown grew from boundaries, from silence, from emotional wounds turned into wisdom. Now their tears carry the weight of realizing you reached a level they cannot follow. The realization stings them deeper than any words you could deliver. What becomes clearer with time is the pattern of emotional dependency. People who once took advantage of your softness now cry, because that softness is no longer accessible. The tears are a reaction to losing their emotional supply. They miss the version of you who forgave too fast, who apologized without cause, who blamed themselves for the chaos. The royalty version does not operate from guilt. This version understands value, understands boundaries, understands energy. When someone who expected your weakness meets your strength, the reaction becomes dramatic. They hold on to old memories, hoping those memories pull you back. But the kingdom you built cannot be dismantled by sentiment. Growth brings a strange kind of power. Not the loud type, not the controlling type. The power that emerges from outgrowing people who tried to shrink your identity. People who once found comfort in your doubt now panic when faced with your confidence. Their cries sound like confessions. Every message longing for your presence is an admission of how badly they misjudged you. Distance exposes loyalties. Time reveals intentions. A crown formed from resilience becomes a boundary they cannot cross. Their retreat felt like victory once. Now it feels like punishment they gave themselves. They watch from afar, wishing for a second chance they know they cannot handle. There comes a moment when returning becomes dangerous, not because of the person, but because of the temptation to fall back into old versions of yourself. Royalty is not about superiority. It is about refusing to abandon the progress earned through pain. The tears calling you back are filled with the hope that the old dynamic can return. But the old dynamic required you to shrink. It required silence, self-sacrifice, emotional suppression. Returning would mean giving up the crown built from survival. And the truth is simple. Once a mind understands its own worth, no amount of crying can convince it to collapse again. Healing changes the way love is perceived. No longer rooted in longing, it becomes rooted in reciprocity. Emotional royalty means no longer begging for the bare minimum. It means needing presence that matches your own. The tears coming from the past are drenched in guilt, not growth. They hope pity will bring you closer. They hope loneliness will weaken your decision. They do not understand that strength built from solitude cannot be undone by their regrets. The throne sits on the foundation of self-respect. Anyone who once played with your heart cannot sit beside you now. Every person who rises eventually faces the return of those who underestimated the journey. The cries become louder as your glow becomes undeniable. They panic when they realize someone else might sit where they once stood. They panic when they see your confidence, your discipline, your new standards. But their panic is not enough to deserve your presence again. The crown demands that connections be genuine. Your throne has no room for those who only appreciate your value when it benefits them. The beautiful twist is that their tears confirm your evolution. Those who once dismissed your potential now drown in their regret. Those who once thought you were replaceable now face the truth that your absence carries a silence they cannot handle. Royalty means learning how to live without apologizing for your shine. It means recognizing who failed to protect your heart when it mattered. Their cries ask for your return, but your journey asks for your continuation. Going back would mean betraying the strength you worked so hard to build. Apologies tend to multiply when the one who was once underestimated finally rises beyond reach. They appear gradually at first, soft attempts to reconnect, disguised as check-ins or casual messages. Then the tone shifts, regret becomes more obvious, words become heavier. Suddenly the same person who once dismissed your boundaries starts speaking with trembling humility. These apologies grow not because they discovered accountability, but because your evolution removed their sense of control. The crown on your spirit changed the atmosphere. They feel the distance you created, the calm you built, the life unfolding without their influence. That realization pushes them into attempts at repair that should have existed long before the damage was done. In their mind, apologies are the currency that might buy back access to the version of you they lost. In your mind, those apologies reveal the depth of their fear. What makes the apologies multiply is the silence they are now forced to sit in. Silence has a way of confronting people with their own actions. Once your presence no longer softens their guilt, they start reaching for any words that might ease the discomfort. This is where their messages change shape. They mention memories that once meant the world to you. They highlight moments where they believe they were a positive influence. They present their regret as transformation. But beneath those poetic lines lies the truth they can no longer escape. They lost someone who would have given more than they ever deserved. The apologies are not meant to heal you. They are meant to soothe themselves. Their desperation to erase the past exposes their inability to accept responsibility without seeking comfort in return. Patterns come alive when people begin to regret too late. Apologies start repeating themselves. The language becomes predictable. Everything is framed as misunderstanding, miscommunication, or emotional confusion. The goal is to dilute the pain they cause by turning it into something less intentional. Yet the multiple apologies reveal a deeper truth. They never expected you to awaken to your worth. The shock of seeing your transformation pushes them into a spiral where regret becomes their only strategy. They hope repetition will soften your heart. They hope persistence will remind you of the version of yourself that tolerated everything. But royalty does not respond to multiplicity. Consistency matters more than repetition, and their consistency shows only in avoidance. Growth changes everything about how remorse is interpreted. What once sounded like sincerity now sounds like a plea for access. This shift becomes clear when apologies grow more emotional over time. The tears they once held back begin to spill into their messages and conversations. Suddenly, they open up about their own struggles. They present their flaws as reasons rather than excuses. This layering of vulnerability is meant to make you question your distance. Yet something in you stays steady, because growth teaches the difference between confession and manipulation. The multiplying apologies highlight how uncomfortable they have become with the silence you chose. That silence became a mirror they cannot escape. Distance reveals sincerity in ways closeness never can. When someone apologizes repeatedly, only after losing access, the intention becomes visible. Royalty in spirit teaches discernment. Apologies that could have existed months ago suddenly arrive in waves. This timing exposes their dependence on your healing to soothe their guilt. The messages intensify when they sense that your emotional world no longer revolves around them. They miss the version of you who cared deeply enough to overlook their mistakes. The new you no longer accepts crumbs, and that shift forces them into a cycle of remorse that grows with each passing day. Tears become common once apologies fail to soften your stance. The emotional weight they once ignored becomes unbearable when they realize the consequences can no longer be reversed. They speak of sleepless nights. They mention moments where your absence feels heavier than their pride. But royalty does not collapse under emotional pressure. Strength built from healing is unmoved by sudden regret. Their apologies multiply because they finally recognize that losing access to someone loyal is more painful than they once believed. In their world, remorse becomes a last attempt to reclaim something they were never prepared to cherish. In your world, the remorse becomes confirmation of your transformation. Every apology adds another layer to the truth they never wanted to face. If they truly valued the connection, the effort would have existed during the storm, not after the silence. When the distance remains firm despite their attempts, panic grows. Their voice cracks, their tone changes. Their messages turn lengthy, filled with explanations that were never offered before. Each apology is a reminder of how much they once took for granted. Each regret reveals the imbalance they created, and each emotional plea shows how deeply your absence now cuts. Their sorrow is the consequence of their own neglect. With time, the apologies begin to feel rehearsed, not because they lack emotion, but because they lack action. Growth turns your eyes sharper. You recognize when words are tools rather than truths. That recognition creates a separation they cannot cross. The apologies continue because they are hoping for a version of forgiveness that grants them the comfort of the past without requiring them to confront the weight of their behavior. This duplicity is exactly what your growth refuses to tolerate. The crown you wear now was built from seeing through empty promises. You no longer bend for expressions that lack transformation. Eventually, the apologies start to shift in tone. Guilt turns into desperation. Desperation turns into longing. Longing turns into sorrow. They speak of missing your strength. They speak of missing your guidance. They speak of missing the version of themselves they saw reflected in your loyalty. Yet royalty does not return to the rooms where their spirit was dimmed. Their tears reveal the price of their own choices. Your glow now reminds them of the future they could have shared but chose to destroy. Every apology becomes a reminder that access to your heart was a privilege they failed to protect.